Tonight, Republicans nuke the Senate, human propaganda at the China-U.S. summit, and the hazy debate over e-cigarettes.
It's like saying jumping out of the 5th story isn't as bad as jumping out of the 10th.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the U.S. is considering a, quote, appropriate response to Tuesday's chemical attack in Syria.
Assad's role in the future is uncertain, clearly, and with the acts that he has taken, it would seem that there would be no role for him to govern the Syrian people.
The Turkish government today said autopsies performed on 3 victims indicate they were exposed to sarin gas, and the Syrian government again denied that it ever deployed chemical weapons against its people. A 24-hour strike organized by Argentina's largest labor union shut the country down. Riot police fired water cannons and tear gas at protesters and made several arrests. Truck and bus drivers, teachers, factory workers, and other labor blocs are protesting austerity measures and demanding higher wages. Russian police arrested 8 people believed to be accomplices of the Kyrgyzstan-born man who detonated a suicide bomb on a St. Petersburg subway earlier this week. Investigators say they also found and defused an explosive device in the apartment where the suspects lived. The DNA testing company 23andMe received approval to sell a $200 personal spit kit that allows consumers to determine their likelihood of developing certain diseases, like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. The ruling marks the end of a 4-year battle that began when the FDA ordered 23andMe to stop marketing its genetic tests, concerned the company hadn't proven its results were accurate. Twitter is suing the federal government to try to stop it from forcing the company to reveal personal information about the user of an anti-Trump account. The handle AltUSCIS identifies as an immigration resistance account, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection had demanded the account holder's name, login, phone numbers, mailing addresses, and IP addresses.
All of the graphics in this, which you provided us.
Today, Congressman Devin Nunes, the House Intelligence Chairman, withdrew from his own committee's investigation into Russian meddling in the presidential election, after struggling for weeks to explain why he worked with White House staff to try and prove President Trump's wiretapping claims. The House Ethics Committee announced that it's investigating Nunes for possible disclosure of classified information, and he promptly stepped aside from the Russia inquiry. It will now be led by Congressman Mike Conaway of Texas. On the other side of the Capitol, the Senate was making a change of its own, and one that's far more enduring.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
After Democrats refused to abandon their filibuster of Supreme Court pick Neil Gorsuch, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell used a procedural vote to get rid of the filibuster for nominees to the High Court. It's another huge blow to the protections meant to insulate the Senate from partisanship and outright majority rule.
The filibuster was designed to let the minority party in the Senate defy the will of the majority party. In other words, it built obstruction into the legislative process. Today, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell took a big step in yanking it back out.
Unfortunately, it has brought us to this point. We need to restore the norms and traditions of the Senate and get past this unprecedented partisan filibuster. Therefore, I raise a point of order that the vote on cloture under the precedent set on November 21st, 2013 is a majority vote on all nominations.
The filibuster has been a shield for the minority for close to 200 years, but even some who've used it think it's time for it to pass on.
I don't care if the House goes out by 12 o'clock. Unless we get that provision included in the bill, this senator will not allow that bill to come for a vote.
Former New York Senator Al D'Amato staged the second longest filibuster on record.
I always thought that the filibuster had a proper place in the Senate, but when you abuse it, and that's what's taking place now, you forfeit your right to utilize it.
There are those who think the government needs the filibuster. Former Senate parliamentarian Alan Fruman is one of those people.
I got to appreciate what it means to have at least one organ of the federal government that works slowly and that takes into consideration the interests of those who are not in power. That's not a bad thing in a representative government.
Unlike the House of Representatives, where the rule is majority rule, the Senate allows the minority party to have a role. The filibuster encourages compromise and can be used to shine a light on policy. For example, Senator Rand Paul used it that way in 2013. The senator held up the confirmation of John Brennan to become CIA director for almost 13 hours because he wanted an answer to this question.
When I asked the president, can you kill an American on American soil, it should have been an easy answer. It's an easy question.
Yeah, it was kind of a stunt, but it brought attention to America's murky drone policy. The filibuster allowed one senator in the minority to stand up for something.
If only the people in power are represented, the rest of us are at the mercy of the majority, and the Senate is the one place that tells the majority, you must be careful, that everybody in this country matters.
This isn't the formal end of the filibuster. 60 votes are still required to move actual legislation through the chamber, so the minority still has some power. At least that's what Senator McConnell promised.
There's not a single senator in the majority who thinks we ought to change the legislative filibuster, not one.
But one of his fellow Republicans still thinks the legislative filibuster will be the next thing to go.
The next time, if we continue on the path we're on right now, the very next time there's a legislative proposal that one side of the aisle feels is so important they cannot let their base down, the pressure builds, then we're going to vote the nuclear option.
President Trump met Chinese President Xi Jinping for the first time today, kicking off a high-pressure 24 hours of meetings between the two world leaders. Everything about Xi's visit to the U.S., from the gift he'll give Trump to Xi's decision not to stay at Mar-a-Lago, is carefully scripted. Another cog in a vast propaganda machine aimed at making the Chinese president seem powerful and beloved. In China, that includes everything from fawning posters of the president to pop songs affectionately naming him Daddy Xi. And for his big visit today, China's government left nothing to chance, busing Chinese Americans to Palm Beach to cheer Xi on. Alexandra Jaffe reports.
It feels a little like kids going to summer camp, but these are grown-up fans of both Xi and President Trump on their way to greet the Chinese president. And they're really excited to be there. Despite Trump's tough talk on China, many of them, like Lily Cummings, who helped organize the gathering, are feeling good about meeting with Xi and optimistic about his presidency overall.
He will make America great again. He loves U.S., he loves America, and he will carry on the U.S. tradition.
But the event wasn't for them. It was organized by the Chinese consulate and meant to reinforce a positive perception of Xi back at home. That perception, of course, isn't always a reality in the countries Xi visits. Today, opponents were among the crowds that lined the streets as he made his way to Mar-a-Lago to protest China's human rights abuses and its occupation of Tibet. But what matters more is how Xi is perceived by Chinese citizens, especially this year when his strength will be tested at China's Communist Party Congress this upcoming fall. He needs to show that he's got strong support, not just in China, but worldwide. That's where Lily and the rest of Xi's U.S. welcome wagon comes in.
In my lifetime, I have never had this opportunity to be so close to both presidents, a Chinese president and a U.S. president. That's really such a great opportunity for us to participate.
We have to keep up this intense pressure on the border criminals.
For the last 15 years, Janet Napolitano has been among the most influential figures in immigration, and she's held some of the most paradoxical views. As the Democratic governor of Arizona, she deployed the National Guard to the border, and as President Obama's first Secretary of Homeland Security, she removed record numbers of immigrants from the country. But she also created Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, the landmark policy that protects dreamers from deportation. Now she's the president of the University of California, and she's in the center of the immigration debate again for her efforts to protect undocumented students.
Janet Napolitano will tell you that her positions on immigration have always been consistent. It's the debate around her that's changed. She's criticized Donald Trump's border wall, and as president of the UC system, she's working to foster relationships south of the border, the reason for her trip to Mexico.
I stand before you today as someone who believes that knowledge and ideas are borderless. We can rise together as equal partners, those of us in California side by side with those of us in Mexico.
When it comes to her time in the Obama administration, Napolitano would rather be remembered as protector than enforcer. Is there a particular policy or achievement from your time at DHS that you're especially proud of?
You know, I think DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and setting up that whole program.
Napolitano has vowed to protect and support dreamers on UC campuses. But for many students, that hasn't been enough to make up for her past.
A lot of my friends that were at the Berkeley campus that couldn't be part of this experience with me because of legal issues around undocumented problems.
It is tragic that mobility gets limited in that way.
How do you and your undocumented friends feel about Janet Napolitano as the president of the UC system?
It was really disheartening to know that somebody who we all know has done some terrible things to families, especially immigrant families, and to know that she's in charge of us is really scary.
Part of my job at the Department of Homeland Security was to enforce the immigration law. What we tried to do was to do it smartly and intelligently, and to put priorities on the enforcement. To enact DACA, to advocate for comprehensive immigration reform.
Is there anything about your time at DHS that, in retrospect, you would have done differently?
It took us a while to get our arms around immigration enforcement and to recognize that there were no priorities instituted in ICE in terms of who should you be focused on, who should be deported. That was a difficult message to send to our ICE agents, and not sure we got it out to the fingertips of every ICE agent out there, but we certainly tried.
Do you mean then that in retrospect you feel DHS under your leadership may have deported people that you maybe think shouldn't have been deported?
Yes, were there some people deported who didn't fall within those priorities? There probably were. But as we got our arms around ICE and began institutionalizing those priorities, those became fewer and fewer.
The stepping up of enforcement, immigration enforcement, during your time at DHS, as I understand it, was something of a first step to satisfy Republican demands in order to achieve immigration reform. But that reform never came. Do you look at that calculation differently now?
Yeah, I don't think that was the calculation. I think that the notion that there was some kind of mega strategy that we're going to show we're tough on enforcement in order to persuade them that they could do immigration reform, that was not the calculation.
That's the narrative that's out there. It's interesting to me that that was not your perception.
Yeah, I know it's the narrative, but sometimes narratives and reality don't quite match, do they?
Yesterday, President Trump's pick to run the FDA, Scott Gottlieb, testified at his confirmation hearing, and senators grilled him on a surprising new priority: e-cigarettes.
E-cigarettes are now available in thousands of flavors. You mentioned one a moment ago about cookies and cream. There's Pop Rocks.
So-called tobacco alternatives have become a multi-billion-dollar industry over the last few years. But the science on their safety is still out. And now the FDA is expected to implement strict regulations on vaping that could kill off all but the biggest players in the business. Eight years ago, Jeff Braithwaite was an out-of-work ex-punk rocker, drinking too much and smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
When was the last cigarette that you smoked?
July 13th, 2009.
At the time, the e-cigarette industry was in its infancy.
It's about time to do it.
And Braithwaite's desire to quit smoking, and a lack of products on the market, led him to create Tasty Vapor, one of the pioneering e-cigarette liquid manufacturers in the country.
Pretty much from the beginning was thinking in terms of a harm reduction aspect. I don't know what this is, I don't know what the long-term effects, but I know for right now, the way I feel, the way I'm breathing, the way I'm exerting myself, the way I'm not getting winded, there's some definite health benefits as a result of not using the former.
But last year, the FDA passed a comprehensive set of regulations for e-cigarettes, mandating that every flavor, and every nicotine variation of every flavor, must undergo a rigorous and costly licensing review.
We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion for our small business to register our products with the FDA.
I don't want to be presumptuous or insult you, but I suspect you don't have $1.6 billion.
No, I got a couple of grand, I'm sure.
E-cigarettes have only been in widespread use for about a decade, so the research on them is limited. But no matter what side of the debate you're on, scientific studies exist to support your conclusion. The FDA, which classifies e-cigarettes as tobacco products, has taken a harsh line on the now $3.7 billion industry. That stance relies heavily on the research and activism of this man.
The evidence is now quite clear that using e-cigarettes in terms of the cardiovascular effects is looking as bad as smoking a cigarette. The effects
is looking as bad?
As bad.
Stanton Glantz is a tobacco researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, and a longtime foe of the tobacco industry. With smoking in retreat in the United States, Glantz has turned his fire on the burgeoning e-cigarette industry.
To me, the biggest health consequence of e-cigarettes doesn't have anything to do with the toxicity of the product. It's that they're continuing and supporting the cigarette epidemic. Use among kids is exploding.
Glantz argues that while e-cigarettes might not kill you as fast as traditional cigarettes, they still might end up killing you.
E-cigarettes are safer for you, correct?
E-cigarettes aren't as dangerous as a cigarette.
Okay.
To say safe, it's like jumping out of...
They're safer.
Well, it's like saying jumping out of the 5th story isn't as bad as jumping out of the 10th story.
But it isn't.
Well, you still might end up dead.
Dr. Glantz is and has been one of my heroes in public health.
Michael Siegel is a professor of public health at Boston University.
I modeled myself after him, and I was able to get mentorship from him, which was incredible.
And like his hero, Stan Glantz, Siegel made his name as a ferocious opponent of big tobacco. But as big tobacco retreated, the world of anti-smoking advocacy descended into civil war. Glantz says Siegel has, quote, lost all credibility as a scientist. Siegel has denounced some of Glantz's research as, quote, unscientific, illogical, and extremely damaging and destructive.
The debate, to me, isn't about whether it's harmful. Of course it's harmful.
It's about whether it's less harmful.
Exactly. Okay. I mean, heating up a liquid of chemicals and inhaling it is not going to be safe.
Why am I being told that this does not work as a smoking cessation device? Over and over by many different organizations. How are they all wrong about this?
Because it threatens the ideology. You know, the ideology in the anti-smoking movement is that anything that looks like smoking must be a bad thing.
I think he's just wrong. One thing that strikes me is that any research which supports his preordained position is good no matter how bad it is, and anything that doesn't is bad no matter how good it is. And
is that the same for you, too?
No.
What bit of research recently has upended a few of your assumptions about e-cigarettes?
About e-cigarettes, nothing has come out that. But
there's a bunch of stuff that's come out that disagrees with you.
No.
Yes, of course there is.
I think what you need to do is you need to look at the actual original research itself.
This brutal ideological battle, Siegel argues, is obscuring an important message: that nicotine doesn't kill people, cigarettes do.
I'm not counting nicotine users, I'm counting bodies. I'm worried about how many body bags there are going to be coming out of morgues of hospitals from people who died from cancer, heart disease, and lung disease.
Based my whole humor on laughing at bigotry. I laugh at Will Chamberlain, ha 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 ha. But if you don't laugh back, it's not funny. I laugh at the blacks, the whites, the purples. Mostly the blacks.
The Ama, or sea women, practice a Japanese fishing tradition that dates back at least 5,000 years. With few options to make a living, women learn to dive for abalone, sea cucumber, and other delicacies to sell at markets. The Ama plunge as deep as 60 feet in freezing water with no oxygen tanks, using techniques passed from generation to generation. Today, of course, women in Japan have other job opportunities, and divers' ranks are dwindling, from 20,000 after World War II to just 2,000 today. And a tradition unique to this country may be on the brink of dying out. Vice News followed one mother-daughter Ama team under the waves.
海女さんっていうのは素潜りで貝や海藻などを取る女性の仕事、もう何十年前からかずっとこの町は伝わってて、女性は皮下脂肪があるから潜れたけど男性の方は寒くて潜れなかったっていうのが一説。 代々ずっとうちの家系は海女さんっていうのもあるし、この町は海女さんで潤ってきたと思うので、この町の良さとしても海女さんがいなくなるってことは絶対してはいけないことだと思うので、私も一日でも多く長く潜りたいって思います。何を取るっていうのはシーズンでもう決まってるんですね。だいたい4月から9月15までがアワビ、まだ11月になってくるとナマコ、サザエ、3月がワカメ。ベテランの海女さんでしたらだいたいアワビ漁でも4、5万、6万ぐらいになるんちゃうかな。1時間半で。1時間半で。下手すりゃ10万になる人もいる。今
結構いいお仕事。
そうですね。取れればね。取れれば。それまでになるのがかなりの。やし保証もないし、天候次第なとこもあるんで。たくさんのそのアワビやサザエが取れるっていうことはやっぱりこの海の状況がいいから今も続いてるんでしょうね。
アワビ見つけた。赤海おる。
That's Vice News Tonight for Thursday, April 6th. Tune in tomorrow night for the award-winning documentary series Vice.
All you can see as far as the horizon is the remains of human refuse.
We have the problem that we make a lot of plastic, we kind of use it once or at the most twice, and then we get rid of it. 8 million tons of that plastic goes into the ocean every year. If we carry on that rate, there would be more plastic by weight in the ocean than fish.